I made my wife's grandmother's recipe, set the table with our wedding china, lit candles, played her favorite boleros. She walked in late, laughed, took a pic, and texted it to someone else as a joke. I was down on my knees in the kitchen, staring at the stovetop like it held all the answers. My eyes burned from the spices, or maybe just from being up too long. I'd been cooking for hours, trying to perfect a dish I couldn't even pronounce the first time I heard it. Pastilla, or pastilla, depending on who you asked. Catalina's grandmother made it once during our first year together. She cried when she tasted it, said it tasted like home. That moment had stuck with me ever since. My name is Andrew. I'm 37. I live in Evanston, Illinois, and I've been married to Catalina for almost 9 years. Lately, though, it didn't feel like much of a marriage. We talked less, touched less. The silences felt longer. So when our anniversary crept up on the calendar, I knew I had to do something different. I wanted to remind her of the early days, when we were still learning each other's languages and rhythms, still laughing at inside jokes that hadn't even formed yet. So I went all out. The dining table, which usually held nothing but unopened mail and half-drunk coffee mugs, was set with the fancy plates we got as a wedding gift. Candles flickered down the center, casting soft shadows on the wall. I had queued up her favorite playlist, old Chilean boleros her grandmother used to sing, and made a tray of mint tea with real silver cups I ordered off eBay. Everything smelled like cinnamon and saffron. I checked my phone. No new messages. She was late. By over an hour. I had sent a few texts, just little updates, a picture of the table, a "can't wait to see you" with a heart emoji. Nothing. The read receipts stared back at me, untouched. I tried not to panic. Maybe she was caught up at the gallery. Maybe traffic. Maybe her phone died. But the food was already cooling. The candles had melted halfway down. I stood in the living room doorway, looking at the scene like I was an outsider. Everything was perfect. Everything except the part that mattered most. A little voice in my head whispered the thing I'd been trying not to think. Maybe she didn't forget. Maybe she didn't care. I pushed the thought down and went to reheat the food. Maybe, just maybe, this would be the night that changed everything. The front door finally creaked open a little past 9. Catalina stepped in like it was any other night, coat slung over her arm, phone in hand. I was glued to the screen. I stood up from the couch so fast I knocked the remote to the floor. "Hey," I said, too eager, too loud. "You're home." She looked up at me and blinked like she hadn't expected to see me there. "Yeah, sorry." Lost track of time. I opened my mouth to respond, to tell her what I'd been doing all evening, but she was already walking past me, slipping out of her boots. I was drifting over the living room like she was checking for dust, not noticing the music, the candlelight, the entire setup. "I made dinner," I said. I tried to keep it casual, like I hadn't been planning this for weeks. "Pastilla, from your grandmother's recipe. I found the one she liked. It took me a while, but I think I got it right." She wrinkled her nose and looked toward the dining table. "Oh, that was it. Oh, you didn't say anything about plans," she added, dropping her bag onto the entry bench. "I was with Maya at the wine bar. We didn't realize it was going to run so late." I stood there, heart hammering in my chest. "It's our anniversary." "I know," she said, not looking at me. "But you didn't say anything. I thought we weren't doing anything this year." I stared at her. "I've been texting you." "Oh." She finally picked up her phone, swiped through the lock screen, and gave a small, awkward shrug. "Didn't see them, I guess." She walked to the dining table and eyed the setup like it was a stage she didn't want to perform on. Then, and I swear this part still plays in my head sometimes, she pulled out her phone, raised it, and took a picture. The flash popped like a slap. "Wow," she muttered under her breath, then typed something fast and tapped the screen. A chuckle slipped out, soft and bitter. "Did you just send that to someone?" I asked. She looked up at me and smiled, but it wasn't kind. "Relax. It's just a joke." "To who?" "It doesn't matter." She didn't answer. Instead, she walked straight to the bedroom and shut the door behind her. A few seconds later, I heard her voice through the wall. She was laughing, talking to someone on FaceTime. I stood there, staring at the table. I didn't sit. I didn't eat. I just picked up each dish, one by one, and put it into the fridge. I blew out the candles. I washed every plate. I wiped down the counter until my hands hurt. She never came back out, and I never said a word. The next morning, I left the apartment without saying a word. She was still asleep, or pretending to be curled away from me on the far edge of the bed. I didn't want a conversation. I didn't want explanations or apologies that felt like afterthoughts. I just needed air. It was early spring in Evanston. The sidewalks were still wet from last night's rain. I walked with no real destination, just moving because standing still felt unbearable. My phone buzzed a couple of times, but I didn't look. I knew it wouldn't be her. Every block I walked, my mind unraveled another memory. Things I hadn't thought about in years started floating to the surface. Like the time she rolled her eyes when I told her I got promoted, muttering something about finally catching up to her. Or the dinner party where she cut me off mid-story and said, "Okay, but no one wants to hear about spreadsheets, babe." Back then, I brushed it off, told myself she was just tired, or joking, or stressed. But it was never just one thing. It was all of it. Tiny cuts over time, each one small enough to ignore, until they weren't. I found myself sitting on a bench near the lake. The breeze was sharp, but it felt good. Honest. I stared out at the water and thought about our first year together. The way she used to talk about her family, her culture, her childhood summers in Valparaiso. I had loved those stories. I had tried to learn her world. I thought that meant something. But somewhere along the way, the warmth cooled. I couldn't say exactly when. Maybe around year 5, when she started spending more nights out with just friends. Or when she stopped asking me how my day was. Or stopped answering when I asked about hers. Had I been blind? Or just too hopeful? The truth started to settle over me like a cold mist. I had been making excuses for her for years. Her mood swings. Her dismissiveness. I told myself it was childhood trauma, old baggage. I thought I was being patient. Understanding. But what if I was just being used? I stood up from the bench and took one last look at the lake. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I had spent too long trying to earn love that should have been given freely. I was done waiting for her to change. 2 days later, I packed the leftover Bastia into a Tupperware container and wrapped it in foil. I put it into a grocery bag along with the mint tea I had made. Untouched, still sealed in the thermos. Then I wrote the note. It wasn't angry. I didn't curse or blame. I just told the truth. I told them, Catalina's parents, how I had spent hours cooking her grandmother's recipe, how I had planned everything to remind her of where she came from, of what we were supposed to be building together. I told them how she came home late, laughed at the dinner I made, and then disappeared into the bedroom to FaceTime someone else. I didn't name names. I didn't speculate. I just laid it out. And then I dropped it all off. Her parents lived about 20 minutes away in Skokie, in a modest ranch home with a yard full of clay pots and overgrown herbs. I had always liked them. Her father, especially. Don Arturo had this old-world seriousness to him, but he never treated me like I wasn't good enough. At least not to my face. I didn't ring the bell. I just left the bag on the porch, tucked the note inside, and drove away. It didn't take long. That night, my phone lit up like it hadn't in weeks. Texts from Catalina started rolling in fast. Catalina, what did you say to my dad? Catalina, why would you drag my family into this? Catalina, you're being so dramatic. Can we just talk? I didn't answer. Then came the calls. First her, then her mother, then her father. It wasn't until Don Arturo left a voicemail that I finally listened to one. Andrew, he said, his voice low and tight, the way it got when he was trying to hold something back. I read your note. I saw the food. I'm disappointed. Deeply. This is not how we raised our daughter. You deserved better than that. I stared at the phone in my hand for a long time after that. She kept calling, kept texting. She tried to defend herself, said she'd just been tired, that it was all a misunderstanding, that I had taken things too personally. She said I embarrassed her by going to her family. But what really got me was her desperation. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't sorrow. It was panic. Because she wasn't used to being held accountable. And I wasn't playing along anymore. By the weekend, Catalina's messages had gone from defensive to pleading. Catalina, can we just talk? Catalina, I didn't mean to hurt you. It was just a bad night. Catalina, you're blowing this way out of proportion. Every text chipped away at me in a different way. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry I hadn't stayed quiet. Sorry I'd made her look bad in front of her parents. Sorry I didn't clean up her mess like always. And still, part of me wanted to believe her. That maybe she had just been tired. That maybe it had just been a moment of thoughtless cruelty. That maybe there was still something between us worth fighting for. But then I'd replay the sound of her laugh, not at the food, not with me, but at me, and the hope would wither right back down. I sat in the quiet of the Airbnb I'd rented across town. It was a small one-bedroom above a bakery. Smelled like cinnamon in the mornings. I hadn't told her I moved out. I just needed space. I scrolled through our old photos, looking for signs, anything that showed how we got here. Smiling vacation selfies. Anniversary dinners. Her head resting on my shoulder. Were those moments real? Or were they just better lit than the truth? More messages came in. Catalina, it was a joke. You're being too sensitive. Catalina, you've always been too emotional. This is what I meant when I said you overthink everything. That one hit hard. Because that's exactly what I used to tell myself, too. That I was the problem. That I needed to try harder, be more patient, stop making everything a big deal. But now, in this tiny apartment that smelled like bread and freedom, I didn't feel dramatic. I felt tired. And clear. She didn't want to fix what was broken. She wanted me to forget it was broken. I started writing a list. Not of pros and cons. Just truths. She humiliated me. She mocked something I did out of love. She made me feel small and didn't even blink. And now she's pretending none of it matters. That was the moment I stopped wondering if I overreacted and started wondering why it took me so long to react at all. It happened by accident. I wasn't snooping. Not really. I'd gone back to the apartment one afternoon to pick up a few things, just enough to get by. Catalina was supposed to be at work, but her tablet was still on the couch, half buried under a throw blanket. The screen lit up when I brushed against it. A new message flashed across the lock screen. Jude, miss you. Today was hard without your voice. I froze. It could have been nothing. A friend. A cousin. Someone from her old poetry group. But her tablet wasn't locked. And my gut already knew. I tapped the message. It opened into a thread that ran longer than I was prepared for. Weeks of messages. Months. Every line more familiar than I wanted them to be. Inside jokes. Flirty banter. Long paragraphs about her distant husband. The weight of pretending. The nights she felt invisible. There were photos. One of them together at a cafe, the kind of candid that only happens when someone's really comfortable being seen with someone else. And there it was. The part that broke whatever was still intact inside me. Catalina, he's trying so hard lately. Like he knows I'm slipping away. I almost feel bad. Almost. I sank onto the edge of the couch, tablet still in my hands, my pulse pounding in my ears. So all of this, the cold distance, the mocking laughter, the missed calls, it wasn't confusion. It wasn't growing pains or communication breakdowns. It was intentional. A slow, measured exit disguised as marital drift. She hadn't just stopped loving me. She had started loving someone else. I took screenshots of everything. Not out of vengeance. I didn't even know what I'd do with them yet. I just needed proof for myself. I needed to know I wasn't crazy. All that time I'd been questioning my worth, wondering if I was too sensitive, too needy, too emotional. She had been unspooling herself from our marriage behind my back. Whispering secrets to someone else. Building a separate world. I left the tablet exactly where I found it. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I walked out of our apartment with nothing but my keys and a quiet, frozen rage settling into my bones. The kind of anger that doesn't shout or throw things. The kind that plans. Because now I wasn't just hurt. I was done pretending she deserved the benefit of the doubt. I waited until the weekend. She came home late Saturday afternoon, still dressed in all black like she'd been out at some gallery event. One of those quiet, minimalist places where people talk about color theory like it's religion. She didn't expect to see me. Oh, she said, freezing in the doorway. You're here. I was sitting at the kitchen table, her tablet next to my coffee cup. Close the door, I said. She hesitated, then clicked it shut behind her. The silence in the room had weight. I know about Jude. Her eyebrows twitched. Not surprise, just calculation. I could almost see the gears turning, trying to decide which version of the truth to start with. Look, Andrew, she started, pulling out a chair across from me. It's not what you think. I tilted the tablet toward her. The lock screen still showed a notification from him. Jude, did you tell him yet? Don't insult me, I said. I read everything. She sighed like she was tired, like I was the one making things harder than they had to be. I never slept with him, if that's what you're fishing for. That's not the defense you think it is. Her eyes narrowed. It was emotional. That's different. Not to me. She looked down at her hands, then back up. You don't understand how hard it's been. Oh, I do, I said, my voice sharper now. I just didn't realize you were fixing it by auditioning replacements. That stung. I saw it land. She shook her head and tried again. I was lonely, Andrew. You don't talk. You retreat. I felt like a roommate for the past 2 years. And instead of telling me that, you told Jude? I didn't plan it. Of course you didn't. You never plan the messes. You just leave me to sweep them up. She got defensive then. You're not exactly perfect. You make everything heavy. You take things so personally. You laughed at me on our anniversary. It was a joke. No, I said, standing now, steady as stone. It was betrayal. And so is this. She opened her mouth to speak, but I was already walking down the hall. I grabbed the duffel bag I'd packed earlier that day. I'm leaving for a while, I said. I need space to figure out what the hell I'm doing. She followed me to the door. So that's it. You're just walking out. I turned, hand on the knob. You made that decision the second you turned to him instead of me. And with that, I walked out. Her voice didn't follow. But the echo of her silence did. The Airbnb I moved into was nothing special. 1 bedroom, small kitchen, linoleum floors that curled slightly at the edges. But it was mine. No tension in the air. No second-guessing every breath I took. Just quiet. At first, I couldn't sleep. Not because I missed her, but because my mind wouldn't stop spinning. Replaying everything. Wondering if I'd been blind or just too willing to believe that things would somehow work themselves out. But after a few days, something shifted. I started waking up early again, not from anxiety, but with a weird kind of energy I hadn't felt in years. I'd go for long walks around the neighborhood, Just me and a coffee I didn't have to microwave 3 times because someone needed my attention. I started eating better. Not to impress anyone, just because it made me feel normal. I even dusted off my old road bike and started riding again. 10, 12 miles along the lake in the early morning. The wind stung my face in the best way. She kept reaching out. Every other day, a text or two. Catalina, can we talk? Catalina, you're being cold. That's not like you. Catalina, I miss you. I know I messed up. I didn't answer. Not yet. I wasn't ready to go back, not even for a conversation. But I wasn't totally alone. Her dad, Don Arturo, called me once. Not to pressure me, not to guilt me, just to check in. She's hurting, he said. But so are you. And what she did was wrong. You don't have to forgive her right now, or at all. It meant something. More than I expected. I thanked him and said I'd call again when I knew what I needed. Meanwhile, my friends, the ones I hadn't talked to in ages because I'd been too busy keeping a marriage on life support, started checking in. I grabbed lunch with Jason from work, who looked stunned to see me outside of a spreadsheet. You look lighter, he said, handing me a beer. Feels like I've been underwater for years, I replied. Even her sister, Isabel, messaged me privately. Isabel, I'm sorry for everything. I didn't know how bad it was. Isabel, whatever you decide, I hope you find peace. I sat with those words for a while. Peace. I wasn't there yet. But for the first time, it didn't feel out of reach. I still didn't know if I'd file for divorce or try to fix what was broken. But I did know this. I wasn't going back to being the version of myself who thought love meant sacrificing everything. Not anymore. A few weeks passed before I agreed to meet her. Neutral ground, a quiet park halfway between the Airbnb and our old apartment. I sat on a bench with my hands tucked into my sleeves, watching a couple kids kick a soccer ball around while Catalina made her way toward me. She looked tired. Not like someone who'd been up all night crying, but like someone who had been running from herself and finally ran out of road. Thanks for coming, she said, standing in front of me like she didn't know if she was allowed to sit. I nodded toward the bench. Go ahead. She sat down slowly, leaving space between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she took a breath. I started seeing a therapist. I looked over. Her voice wasn't defensive. Just small. I know I hurt you. I know I broke something important. I've been thinking a lot about why I did that. Why I acted like I did. And I don't have a neat answer, but I'm trying to figure it out. I stayed quiet. I also reached out to a couples counselor. Just in case you ever want to talk with someone else in the room. Her words weren't rehearsed, and they didn't come with a list of excuses. That surprised me. I nodded, slowly. I've started therapy too. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. Really? Yeah. Turns out I spent most of my life trying to keep things together so hard that I stopped asking if they were worth keeping. She looked down at her hands. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I want to try. Not to fix everything overnight. Just to understand what we've turned into. And maybe try to be better. I'm not promising anything, I said. I'm not even sure if I want to stay married. But I'll go to a session. We scheduled it that night. 1 week later, we sat across from a soft-spoken woman in a warm office, framed diplomas behind her, and a little ticking clock on the side table. The hour felt long. Catalina cried. I didn't. I spoke plainly. She tried to explain what she'd been feeling. I listened, but the part of me that used to cling to every scrap of hope wasn't responding the same way anymore. Afterward, as we walked to our cars, I turned to her and said, we may not make it. I know, she said, but I'm not going to destroy myself trying to save something that doesn't want to be saved. Her eyes welled up, but she nodded. Whatever happens next, I thought as I pulled out of the lot, it'll be on my terms. For the first time in years, that felt like enough.